Know that you're here by engaging with us in chat. Let us know your name, your organization, your role. That'd be awesome. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes here. It's really great to see you. Happy Friday. Hello, Brian. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. I have a couple minutes after the hour, so we're really glad that you're here. Thanks so much for joining us. It is February 19th, and we have how many more weeks of winter left to go? My name is Susan Barrett, and I am so glad that you guys are here. We are going to begin, if I can figure out my technology here. Zoom seems to put little features on every week and without really telling us. So, okay, so here we go. We're hoping as you enter this space that you feel a little bit grounded. We had some nice music and hopefully you got a couple of deep inhales before we begin today. We're really excited for this PLC. We've got Monterey County who is going to be spotlighted today. So we're really thankful that their team is here, and let's get started. Before we start though, I do want to make sure that we're taking good care of ourselves and we're creating a platform where we can engage with each other and not only learn about content, but create an emotional support team and a safe space where you feel like you can let us know some of the challenges and barriers that you're facing. And hopefully we've organized these sessions so that you feel like you're being supported by a team. Please continue to double check on friends and colleagues as we go through a rapid fire series of crises that our country faces. Remember to utilize your employee assistance program and the resources that are offered there. And if you're feeling a sense of hopelessness, please know that there's a suicide hotline, and a national hotline, and there are many warm lines that have been established in your local areas. Please be engaged with us. We realize that there's a lot of stress, a lot of Zooming going on. It's been another solid week of Zoom calls. We recognize it's Friday and we need to take a couple of deep breaths, pay attention to joy, recognize and validate grief. Please take some biology movement breaks and hydrate, and nurture your body with healthy food, building those calming routines for sleep and build routines for daily exercise. Find a buddy in your life that will help prompt you and reinforce using all of these self-care strategies, so we actually build a platform for collective care. So we're really glad that you're with us today. We do want to take a moment to connect and to hold space just to ground ourselves in this work today as we move forward in the content. We will be spotlighting a couple of new resources for you today, and we're also wanting you to engage with us about ways that we can support you moving forward and some challenges that you might be experiencing right now. As I mentioned, the spotlight today will be primarily on Monterey County, and we're so excited that that team has joined us, and we'll give you some time in some random breakout rooms to discuss their work and make some develop some actions for yourself on how to take this information back to the teams and the systems that you're serving. We have some exciting new resources that are hot off the press as of late last night that we want to share with you, and then finally we'll do a quick wrap up. Did I miss anything? Kelly, Katie, Lucille, Patty?
I don't think so.
Okay, awesome. All right, so if you wouldn't mind engaging with us in chat, on a squirrel scale, and attribution goes to Caltech for this one. But if you could just engage with us and let us know how you're feeling today. You're so right, Amy, 29 days until spring. I don't even want to tell you it's going to be 70 degrees here in California this week. So if you could just let us know how you're feeling today, that would be awesome. I think people are feeling like squirrel number 8 because it's Friday. Awesome. Thank you so much for engaging with us. It's nice to hear from you all. All right, so let's take a mindful moment. We're going to be talking and highlighting mindfulness activities when we speak to our friends in Monterey County. And so we wanted to start with doing a mindfulness activity, but we also wanted to remind everyone that mindfulness is actually a set of practices, and it will take the same kind of instructional logic that we apply with everything to enhance our ability to control our attention, to regulate our emotions, and increase self-awareness. And so we are launching a lot of the enhancements on social emotional learning and mindfulness practices, and we're incorporating those into our staff development, and we're incorporating that into our academic settings. And so we wanted to have Casey lead us in a mindfulness activity before we launch into content today. And so I will hand it over to Casey to lead us through this section.
Okay, how's my sound? Can you hear me okay?
You're perfect, very clear. Thanks, Casey.
I turned off my video, so my disclaimer, y'all, is I've been kicked off twice already on this call. So if you don't hear my voice, it's because I'll be back very soon. So at this time, I'd invite all of y'all to just get settled in a comfortable seated position with your spine tall. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. And if you'd rather not close your eyes, just soften your gaze and focus down. Be comfortable. Now let's begin by deepening your breath. Please take 5 slow, long, deep breaths. Bringing awareness to the flow of your breath as it moves in and out of your nostrils, and attuning to your own natural rhythm. Feel the coolness of your breath as it moves down your throat. With each inhale, breathe in nurturance and ease. And with each exhale, see if you can let go a little bit more deeply than the breath before, releasing any tension or holding that you may have in your body. Sense the breath becoming even and smooth and balanced as you let go of the past and any anticipation of the future. For the next few breaths, just try experiencing this moment. Observe yourself physically. Is your body tense or you're holding anywhere? Or is it free and open? Use your breath to release any holding or gripping you're sensing. Next, take a moment to notice how you are mentally. If you're distracted, or if your mind is focused and calm. And simply notice where you are without judging it. Next, notice how you're feeling emotionally. Any mood or feeling that may be affecting you in this moment. And just notice. And finally, please bring attention to your heart. Take a few moments to reflect on what gifts this life has given you. Inviting gratitude for everyone and every opportunity that has led to this moment. And rest here for a few more breaths. Now bringing attention back to your breath and the room and where you're sitting. The earth is holding you, supporting you unconditionally, and bringing your gifts of gratitude with you through this transition. To gently open your eyes into this lovely day. Welcome back.
Thank you, Casey. All right. So as we come back after the mindfulness activity, I'm wondering if you would be willing to come off mute or engage with us in the chat about how you're feeling now. And if that made any difference in kind of how you're approaching Friday. And I realize that we're using kind of a squirrel scale, but would love for you to engage with us and maybe give us a self-report on how that helped anchor and your focus on today's session. Good, thank you, Tammy, for offering. Feeling less tension, feeling very relaxed. Sheila's saying it's time for nap, so again, good, thank you, Whitney. More focused and present. Thank you, Kelsey. That's exactly the purpose, right? To be more focused and present. And as we think about data beyond kind of the self-report data, today, as a result of going through a quick mindful moment and starting this session, I offer you or invite you to keep track of your present, as Kelsey said, more focused and being present in the moment, and keep track of your on track and off track time as you think about the attention that you're giving this session today. And so again, as we ask our schools to dig a little deeper beyond self-report data, we also want to be tracking our attention to being present in the moment and on-track behaviors for our children and youth. And so we want to be able to model that with our staff as we engage in these mindful practices with the adults in this moment. So I know the squirrel scale was a little bit of a silly way to kind of ask how we're feeling. And I just wanted to offer that we do have, there is a mindfulness scale. And I wanted to offer that these are example questions. So as you're working with your staff and you are working on mindfulness activities, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that there is an evidence-based scale that could be used with your staff, so we can start to really talk about and secure buy-in with using it with our staff so they feel more comfortable approaching mindfulness activities in the classroom as educators who really aren't used to being asked to do these activities. So we want to start with the staff, and we just wanted to offer a mindfulness scale. So with that, we were wondering if anyone wants to engage with us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are in the country, wondering how you're supporting each other and what challenges or questions you might have or things that are coming up this month, and also wanting to know how we can offer help and assistance moving forward with supporting you. So if you want to come off mute, or you want to engage with us in chat, that would be awesome. We'll just take a couple minutes to kind of share out. I'm going to stop sharing for the moment so we can look at each other and be with each other in this space. Any celebrations or things that you want to offer the group or things that we can be helpful with that are happening this month? We put you on such a deep relaxation moment that you're
So, this is Sheila from
Hi, Sheila.
Michigan, and I want to introduce my colleague who's joining the ISF network team now, Tammy Morrow. She has worked with My Blissy, which now we're the MIMTSS Technical Assistance Center, so support the state of Michigan. But she has a lot of information about district implementation teams, and so she has joined our ISF team to help move our process along. And so I want to send a shout out and introduce her to the rest of you guys.
Oh, you're so sweet, Sheila. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Yes, I'm going to be leading the work in Michigan for our 2 model demonstration districts along with Sheila, and working on developing content with Susan and others, and training and coaching. So I'm very excited. I've been with the TA Center for 9 years, predominantly in our integrated side, working with districts to set up district infrastructures, but I have a really long, strong mental health background. So I feel like I'm marrying 2 of my passions together. So I'm extremely excited about this new role.
Oh, thank you. What a huge celebration. Welcome, welcome, Tammy. Thanks, Sheila.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila.
So my wait time skills are really bad in virtual sessions. Any others that want to offer any ways that we can be supportive, or things that are coming up this month that you're wanting technical support with or wanting to bring up, or any celebrations?
Susan, maybe we could also introduce Jason and welcome Georgia to our group here today.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. I'm looking at one set of screen.
That's all right.
We have a whole new,
Hi, Jason.
okay. Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate the invitation, Susan. Thanks for letting me join this group today. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Kelly.
Another state coordinator that's doing fantastic work, integrating mental health in the PBIS framework. Any others that I'm missing that want to do a shout out? Anybody new on the call that want to introduce themselves? Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah.
I forgot that there's 2 screens on here. Okay, all right. So with that, we're going to be able to connect in the breakout rooms today. So we'll be able to continue to engage with each other. And again, you know, we're always available. So any ways that we can help support you as things emerge in between our PLCs, it would be awesome to hear from you, and we will connect you with the right resources. So one of the things we wanted to share with you all today, given that a lot of our teams are also going through the Center for School Mental Health curriculum, we were really excited to see this resource being shared out by the National Center on School Mental Health, and we wanted to offer a link for you all to have as a resource. If you've got other schools that are using both PBIS tools and SHAPE tools, or the SHAPE system that the Center for School Mental Health, or you're having a team that goes through this, I think they did an extraordinary job of walking implementers through the overview of the frameworks and the tools that are available, and the similarities and the differences. And they really did a brilliant job of capturing the key messages. So we wanted to offer that as a resource. Thank you so much, Kelly, for posting that link in the chat. So I'm not sure if everybody's seen that, but we wanted to make sure you were aware of that. The other thing we wanted to offer you today is something that we just, I think will be posted probably the early next week. You'll have an advanced preview. We'll put it in the chat pod right now, is a brief on the phases of recovery. So again, knowing that so many of our ISF demonstration sites and schools across the country are building their return to school plans and really pulling in mental health, we thought that this would be a great way to organize all of the work moving forward And we oftentimes use the stages of implementation, but here you'll see how we're directly connecting it to the phases of recovery in the systems that we're working with. So you're seeing that priority for wellness kind of thread through. The thing I really like about this document, if we've got, as we're working with schools who are just getting started, you can see how we've isolated activities across the top in green for sites just getting started. But we also have sites that have been implementing for a while that might be wanting to strengthen their implementation efforts. And so we offer specific items related to strengthening their efforts with PBIS by enhancing, for example, mindfulness activities inside their PBIS effort. And so you'll see at the bottom, we've got specific things. So thank you again for posting that resource. Okay, so this is really what we want to spend our time on today. I am so excited to have our Monterey County team of champions here with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Esther Rubio, Casey Rodenbush, and Haley Newman from Monterey County. And Esther, you want to take it away? And I can advance the slides when you need me to.
Perfect. Thank you, Susan. And I just wanted to start with a few slides, just kind of showing who we are in Monterey County and what we're about. And just showing here our history in terms of when we started PBIS and how we ended up where we are today. So we were fortunate in 2012 to have behavioral health actually be the one to introduce PBIS to our county. And so we started with some pilot schools, and then we were fortunate to receive the funding from the federal government through the School Climate Transformation Grant to be able to work with 3 of our largest districts in Monterey County to implement PBIS. And we were fortunate to go to an APBS conference in San Francisco, where we heard a presentation by Dr. Eber and Kelly on ISF. And we were just so taken away, and we said, we have to do this in Monterey County. So like in 2015, we started talking about it, and we decided from there that this was something that we wanted to do. So our funding has been for infrastructure and setting up systems. Sometimes I get questions about, does it go to student services? And that's kind of another training and another presentation for another day. But the funding that we've received has been something for us to be able to put our systems in place. Next slide. So just briefly, because I tend to notice that folks from out of California think that everybody, or at least Monterey County, is one big beach party. And we actually sit in the valley, the Salinas Valley, and we do have the coast in our county as well, but the majority of our students reside within the Salinas Valley. So here's just a snapshot of our population. We have almost 80,000 students. And you can see we have 15,000 students in our large district. Haley is going to talk about her work at at 2 of her schools at the Salinas Union High School District. But you can see we have a range, and we've worked with the 3, as I mentioned, 3 of the largest districts in Monterey County. We're predominantly Hispanic Latino. We are a farm working community. With that, we have many English language learners. And also migrant students. The percentage has gone down just because many of our families don't move anymore, but it doesn't mean that they still don't have the characteristics of our migrant families. So, and you can see in terms of socioeconomic disadvantage, the percentages. We have many families living in one dwelling, multi-families, so it makes it much harder for our families that they have to live in very small dwellings with a lot of people. Next slide. So I mentioned that we heard about ISF, we heard the presentation, and what we did was we took this to our leadership team. We have a leadership team representing these organizations in these districts, and presented it to them. What would this look like? Why it's important for Monterey County? And overwhelmingly, we felt that mental health integration was really important and something that we wanted to do across the board for all of our schools. And Casey will be talking to you briefly about the work that she's been doing from the mental health side through Monterey County Behavioral Health. So the county office provides support. We lead those leadership team meetings. We coordinate the ISF meetings, and we support our districts and our schools with implementing PBIS and ISF, and also social emotional learning, mindfulness, etc. So we're an active part, but we all work together. As I said, it's not one agency that's carrying the load. We have this divided among the multiple agencies within our community. And finally, we've just established some working agreements. I think one of probably the most complicated was figuring out what is our role. And so we were able through this process to outline what does the county office do, what does the district do, what does the school do, what does behavioral health do. And once we were able to iron that out and that people became informed of what their role was, it made the job a lot easier. So with that, I'll turn it over to Casey.
Thank you, Esther. What Esther is describing is 4 years of relentless work that we have done in partnership and collaboration. And so around the time that the transformation grant was awarded to MCOE, behavioral health also started providing services for students in general education. We had historically been providing them only for students with IEPs. And so once we had this expanded ability to serve, I showed up and became a manager, and I changed everything. I got all the information from Lucille and all the other greats that made this possible here today, and helped inform the way I needed to do my staffing. So I combined all the contracts. In Monterey County, we're serving 25 school districts. The territory is wide. There's a lot of different demographics across the county. I have a team of 65 staff, and we're serving about 122 schools. So that's a combination of general education and special education. Next slide, please. So this is a graphic of our system of care. So in behavioral health, we're county behavioral health, and county behavioral health also serves juvenile probation, kids and child welfare. We are also at the emergency room doing psychosocial assessments on students that arrive on a 5150 hold. And we are also connected to law enforcement when they respond to mental health crises in the community. We have a mobile response team. Just because we have all these clinicians and staff in the school in Monterey County through behavioral health, that gives us we're a nexus point. So we have a direct access to all these other systems, which makes our ability to serve our county and community so much more awesome, because we can get information that we need very quickly, and we have the relationships in place to make that possible. Next slide, please. So what I've done with the role of the mental health clinician initially, every single one of them, they were either on an IEP team or a gen team, and they were all itinerant, and they were only providing individual therapy services. They didn't have a lot of interaction with the school staff. If you asked any administrator or person at the school that worked there, they wouldn't be able to tell you who their behavioral health clinician was before I made all these changes. And so after learning about ISF, due to create the order, I developed a full continuum, our service and supports models, a full continuum of care, and the clinicians provide supports and services across all tiers. They're serving students in both in general education and special education, and they're assigned to just a couple sites. Some of them have I think it's awesome and maybe a luxury to some, being able to spend all day on one school site. So I have clinicians that are dedicated and they serve both populations. They're more visible, they interact, and they push into classrooms. They do trainings for the school personnel. And they're just overall woven into the climate and culture of the school communities. Next slide, please. Also, before when training happened initially when MCOE had their grant and they started doing all the training with the districts, the behavioral health clinicians weren't involved in those trainings at all. When we started to come together, the clinicians sat into the PBIS trainings, and they started forming their own teams together with the school staff, which was new. They didn't have a lot of mental health training. Behavioral health as an agency was not providing a lot of mental health training for the schools. And now you could ask anybody. Whitney is one of my supervisors here with us today. She does trainings. We also have the clinicians that do trainings. Before, moving from just being a one-on-one clinician to actually being a resource for the entire learning community, it's been a beautiful thing. Also, what's extremely critical and amazing with this model is that we've had the clinicians sit on the PBIS teams, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 teams, and they help inform the interventions and help the school staff and other community agencies that are represented understand what rises to the threshold of a behavioral health intervention, because it's more severe. So we really help the school staff implement interventions that are lower level and then move up as we need to. Next slide, please. And with this, now Haley is going to talk about all the things that she does at Salinas. Well, she works for Salinas Union High School District, and she is their PBIS coordinator and does amazing things. So Haley.
Yes. Thank you, Casey. And so as you're hearing Casey talk through kind of the evolution of ISF and how clinicians are more embedded into the different school cultures, I can talk about what that looks like at an actual school. So I'm Haley. I'm the PBIS coordinator for the Salinas Union High School District. And this year we had 2 different demo schools that we've been working with for the past couple of years. And perfect. And so our 2 schools, and so before I go into that, this is how our clinicians, so using ISF, are involved into our 3 tiers. So we're very familiar with triangles. And so the mental health clinicians helped out all 3 tiers. So on the right-hand side, you can see examples of what they did and dive into more of what I'm going to talk about today. So we still use PBIS as our framework to support a single delivery. This also helped make our referrals to MCBH clinicians for students that need tier 3 therapeutic services more appropriate. So we still used our tier systems of support. There was 1 committed and functional team with tier 2-3 that our clinicians are placed on. So they are members of our tier 2-3 team. We still use data and we use evidence-based practices. And so moving on in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. These are our 2 demo schools. So I know Esther communicated our data and what that looks like for our demographic in our county. This is the demographic for our 2 demo schools. So we had Salinas High and Washington Middle School. And what was nice about these 2 schools being demo schools is that Washington Middle School feeds into Salinas High. So there's also a transition of a continuum of support for students. So we had that communication there. But for this presentation, I'm going to mainly focus on Salinas High School. And so Salinas High School, and I'll talk a little bit more about this resource. Yes, but it is fantastic. Thank you for mentioning that, Patty. So this is a mindfulness resource that was used in tier 1. And it was co-created by one of our clinicians. And I know that you'll have access, I think, to this PowerPoint, Susan, right? Yeah, so this is hyperlinked. So in case you wanted to see what was built at the tier 1 level with a clinician, you have access to that. And so moving on a little bit deeper into what this looks like in the tiers. So our clinicians helped with, I know in clinician speak, sometimes it's macro, meso, and micro levels, but that does align with our tier systems of support. So looking a little bit deeper at tier 1 first. So again, our clinicians help out all 3 tiers. So this would be a tier 1 intervention that was used and built with our tier 1 team, but also with that support of the clinician for a school-wide lesson. So the description of the intervention was a mindfulness. So it was a mindfulness PBIS lesson with Monterey County behavior health clinician targeted lessons based on data. And you can see the description on the left-hand side. How we knew this was a problem. It wasn't perception. Some people thought it was the perception of, oh, the students are really stressed out, but we needed to have that quantitative data as well to figure out that this was a need that we needed to push up. So one way we did that was through our request for assistance form. So for our particular PBIS framework, our request for assistance form is a bridge between tier 1 and tier 2. So our tier 2-3 team with the clinician on there discovered that a lot of the requests that were coming in were students that were struggling with anxious behaviors, that were struggling with stress management, and they didn't have the coping skills to care for themselves with those big emotions. So they were struggling being academically successful. So they noticed a high quantity of those requests for assistance forms comparative to other behaviors. So because they noticed this data trend, they decided to push that up to tier 1. Other data pieces that we used were the number of suicide risk assessments from month to month. So there was an increase in suicide risk assessments that were held. So we also knew that this was a need. Another one was Gaggle Alert. So that is a program that we have on our student Chromebooks. Our district is one-to-one Chromebook with our students, and there is a program that runs. And if students Google suicide or self-harm or any kind of keywords, then an administrator will get alerted. And then that's when we meet with the student and ask them about what they looked up or what they wrote about in a Google Doc. And so the number of Gaggle alerts that we were getting and checking in with students on also was a data point. Also, our disrespect and defiance, I think we looked at that data because some of those students maybe needed coping skills for those bigger behaviors that they were exhibiting. Or if they were stressed, sometimes that comes out as different ways with different people. And so sometimes that staff member would see, oh, they're being defiant or disrespectful when they're actually trying to manage their emotions, but not in the best way. And so they also looked at that Swiss data as well. Through this tier 1, we did progress monitor through a student feedback form attached to that PBIS lesson about mindfulness. So we had that student feedback form. We did an informal teacher interview and review. And this was mainly the Fidelity assessment. So our teachers teaching and noticing those coping skills and strategies to help the students in their classroom cope with stress and manage it in their classrooms. And then we did have continuous reviewing of student outcome data that was listed in Uncovering the Need. And then for an outcome data, we looked at a decline in office discipline referrals, specifically for disrespect and defiance using Swiss. And we looked at the decline in the total number of suicide risk assessments and Gaggle alerts. And of course, the informal teacher interviews and review to see if we met the need that was described. And did I miss anything, Susan?
No, not at all. I think we're all just blown away by what you've been able to do and how you developed the evaluation metrics before you installed the evidence-based intervention. And that's really something that we want our tier 1 teams to do. So I just wanted to elevate a couple of comments that you made. So one is that there is a team with clinicians on there that are scanning and looking and actively uncovering the trends and patterns. And I love the way you described how they're kind of staying at that aggregate level. They're not taking a deep dive into the specific request for assistance. Again, they're looking at the whole entire system to figure out how we fortify and strengthen tier 1, because we were seeing about 20 to 30% of our students who were experiencing stress, and we were seeing that in the different data trends. So I absolutely love that. I think the other thing, Haley, I think when we were talking in our planning calls that all of us were completely geeking on was the fact that there was a mind shift with a lot of the educators, and that when they started to see behaviors being displayed in their classrooms, instead of writing a referral for behavior and filling out their Swiss office referral form, they were reaching for the request for assistance forms to figure out ways that we could increase supports, because they were really worried about the social emotional health. And so can you talk a little bit about how that switch occurred?
Sure. And it was definitely a mindset switch, as you mentioned. And as we know, that's sometimes a little bit more difficult with high school teachers that maybe are more content minded. And so I will say that the change really started at the county level. So with Esther and Casey, that had the funding to provide training on socio-emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, de-escalation, and mindfulness. So a lot of those funding of those initial trainings, including PBIS itself, came from the county. And so I think without this framework set up, we wouldn't be able to continue the work inside of our own district with providing kind of more of that trauma-informed lens. And trying to shift the mindset from a punitive approach to more of a restorative and proactive approach. I know that also the tiered fidelity tool or the TFI from PBIS has an item that explicitly mentions what are we doing as staff that is more restorative and proactive in our classrooms. And so our tiered teams have really grabbed onto that item and have done a lot of in-school training for their staff around that mind shift. In addition, I think our district is also in the process of building wellness centers. And that also shows that our district has an emphasis on wellness and mental health. And so I think that has added to the shift. As well as really teaching what is crisis and what is not crisis and what can you do about it in your classroom. So I think even at basis level, as the teacher who did not know all of this as a first year teacher, I thought if a student wasn't listening to me, I was like, uh-oh, why aren't they listening to me? And so I didn't know. I thought that was like, okay, what do I do about this? But that was not a crisis. A crisis is there are different kinds of crises that are immediate, that need immediate support. There are crises with students that I need to request assistance for. And there are things that I can redirect in the classroom in a more restorative way. So that's kind of how we approached and started that mindset shift.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for that. And again, one more point to elevate is that the data used to uncover the need will be the data that we're going to use to progress monitor and build outcomes. So the metrics, the natural data sources that we're using will help inform that evaluation process, again, before we install the actual intervention, because we want to make sure that what we invest in is actually being implemented with fidelity and actually benefits student outcomes. So I love the setup of this, that a lot of our teams could use to organize the process of setting up those evaluation protocols that oftentimes we're not spending enough time doing and developing out. And we really want to move beyond that self-report. So we really want to get into other data points to consider. And remember, they're looking at the outcome level, they're looking at the decline in the total number, right? Because we're still sticking here at tier 1. So with that, we wanted you to have an opportunity to engage with each other. So we're going to be breaking into, I think, 4 breakout rooms. And I want to just offer just one basic question, wanting to know how this is different from your current way of work, or if it's similar, but we really want to have you describe ways that this might be a little bit different than what you're seeing inside your schools. And so I also wanted to offer considerations for some discussion. So thinking about what are some of the other data sources that you might be using to inform tier 1 needs and strengths, and sort of, are you looking at community forecasting data? Are you looking at other data sources that we haven't mentioned yet? Also wondering about the MOU process and how that really drives the ability to have clinicians be really well positioned and completely embedded into the fabric of the school community, and to what extent we're really crystal clear on the roles of the team members. And again, this notion of really moving from waiting for a data point to come in to really being much more proactive at the team level to really engage in uncovering the needs and looking at those patterns and trends that are emerging before students have an opportunity to fail in our schools. And then finally, maybe some conversations around staff buy-in to deliver mindfulness instruction. You know, how might we position our staff, like Kaylee was describing the process that they had, what are some of the ways that you're engaging and securing buy-in so we're comfortable in this space of mental health. So with that, if you want to take a picture of that, that will help guide your conversations in your breakout rooms, that would be great to do right now. And Kelly, if you could just, if you could pull us into breakout rooms, if you can, that would be great. Welcome back, everybody. All right, hopefully you had some awesome dialogue. I can't wait to jump into the discussion. Do I have a volunteer to go first to report out some of the highlights of the discussion?
Sure, so I can, Kim, go ahead.
Okay, Tricia, I'll make it quick. How's that? We were in awe of really capturing such complex work in basically one row on a slide and just noting all of the system's efforts that needed to go in to make that happen, what Casey shared. And I'm sure others are going to see that as well. The other thing that people raised were just constantly having, I think Esther talked about this, is staying on message. And like even in this time when we're seeing data sources that indicate it's really a tier 1 area to be looking at, schools tend to want to go back into old ways of thinking and say, oh, we need to, you know, do this tier 2, tier 3 stuff instead. So those are some big ahas for us, I think.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. Yeah, and Esther, I'm so impressed too, to Kimberly's point about the way that you had different funding sources, but you have a single system of delivering those different funding sources. So you've got school climate, but you also have other grants that are coming in, and you've stayed with kind of that ISF logic as you apply all the different grants, despite the different measures that you're accountable for the reporting. So you've given a really nice barrier between the reporting out to the federal agencies and the implementation efforts seem really seamless. So congratulations on that. Others?
Sure,
Amy?
so I can
I'm sorry,
jump
Trish.
in.
Yeah.
So Bob spoke up about just being incredibly impressed with the comprehensive nature of the data collected, talking through this idea of, you know, suicide assessment, the gaggle forms. He talked a little bit about data they're trying to capture right now during the pandemic, outside of ODRs around attendance and engagement. So I'm not just here, but I'm engaging in the work, as well as when, you know, we come back, the idea of those unplanned visits to counselors, nurses, et cetera. So thinking broadly about the data was something that really struck Bob. Kim, to your point, Miriam also kind of reiterated that message around being so impressed with the fact that they kept using data to inform tier 1, as opposed to like kind of going back into our old practices. And then Katie spoke up about her being impressed with the comprehensive nature of the system, which is often an edge of growth for us. So beginning with that end in mind, defining what those outcomes are going to be for the system was something that she was really impressed by. And then we had a great back and forth about Miriam was able to ask Whitney about how clinicians were more accessible, and Whitney was talking us through how their clinicians have office hours, not for seeing kids, but being able to consult with teachers on kids that are struggling, and really being a help to the system, as opposed to just servicing kids in this model by using early intervention funding.
Wow, I wish we had recorded that. That was
We are recording today.
Oh, we are. But even in the breakout rooms, we can do that?
Oh, no, the breakout rooms didn't. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. Thank you, though, for capturing your conversation. That was amazing. Amazing. Thank you.
I can go next.
Thanks, Amy.
Although I'm hesitant to follow Kimberly and Trisha, but our group was lucky enough to have Kelsey in the room, so we could ask her some questions and get some insights from her. So the highlights for us were that the real mindset shift that took place among the staff around what is a crisis and what isn't a crisis. And the difference between understanding PBIS and how much of a leap it is to go from just understanding PBIS to understanding what it looks like really to integrate mental health. That's a pretty sharp learning curve to go from kind of an individual student model to more of a systems model. It's a big leap for people. There wasn't a lot of conversation around data sources yet. So that was a really good insight that we could move into more SEO sort of data sources at Tier 1. And I thought it was really interesting that Kelsey talked a little bit about the MOUs and how after doing the MOU work, you could see much more inclusion of the clinicians in the work and how they became much more part of the building and of the work. And it sounds like the MOU process really made a big difference for them. Awesome. Kelsey, Sheila, anyone else from that group have anything to throw in?
No, you did a good job summarizing us.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Do we have one more? That was 3. We had 4 breakouts, right? One more?
We haven't spoken yet. We didn't have a designated note taker, but I'm happy to share out some, and I'll ask Diane and Patty to jump in for the pieces that I missed. But I too expressed great admiration for all the use of data for informing Tier 1. It's something that I hope happens, but since I'm at the state level, not the district level, I can't really speak in detail as to how and whether that actually occurs. It's certainly the message that we send to people, but it's one thing to say it, it's another thing entirely to do it. So we talked a little bit about teaming and the different roles and responsibilities and incorporating that information to MOUs. But most importantly, we talked about compensation for clinicians, and as these role changes occur, the need to be able to pay people when they're not providing billable hours. So the answer can't always be just put it in the MOU and make people do it without being compensated. There's a limited amount of space for that, but it can't always be that. It's just not sustainable. So we're hopeful to hear any and all suggestions on that in the future. I think it's going to just be a barrier until it goes away. But
right. Yeah, and we're already planning a whole session on funding where we can kind of come together and dialogue about how we really flex our muscles with funding. And yeah, I think it just needs a 6-hour discussion, right? So we'll plan on having that in the future. Thanks so much.
Sure.
All right, so I'm looking at the time and I'm wanting to move us towards Tier 2, Tier 3, and you'll have an opportunity to meet with your breakout team. So with that, I'm going to show the PowerPoint again and turn it over to Haley.
Okay. All right. So now looking at a tier 2 and 3 intervention that is still based in that mindfulness, and knowing that is something that we wanted to focus on all the way down the tiers. So we already talked about Tier 1, what that looked like, what data we looked like in order to implement. And now I'm going to focus more on a Tier 2, 3 intervention that's still utilized our partnership with our clinician from Monterey County Behavioral Health. And so this description of intervention was a mindfulness targeted group, and it was co-facilitated with MCBH. So it wasn't a therapy group. It was truly a Tier 2, was within Tier 2 group. And so our data points to get in, so students that were nominated or a form was submitted for them using the request for assistance form, specifically students that needed support with mental health challenges, where mindfulness strategies can help build their toolkit for coping strategies. Also through student interview, the student couldn't name a coping skill to manage their emotions after the Tier 1 approach. So this was after that school-wide mindfulness lesson went out through the Tier 1 PBIS. And still after that, they couldn't name a coping skill. They didn't know how to de-escalate themselves or to manage their emotions that were coming up. Or they were students that were identified from one of the gag goal alerts or from a suicide risk assessment that would benefit from this intervention based on that conversation through those different protocols. How we progress monitored. So this was, a 8-week session once a week. And so we progress monitored using qualitative data expressed through the student survey. So we sometimes did emotional check-in or check-out, as well as students self-assessing what strategies were learned through this group. Teacher surveys. So we sent their teacher a survey to see if they were able to cope with the stress that was exhibited in their school environment so that they were more academically successful. And then through student surveys, like as mentioned. Outcome data was that they could exhibit mindfulness as a healthy coping skill for daily stress. So as I say, outcome data, the terminology we use for Tier 2 and 3 is data point to get in or out, or entrance and exit criteria. With PBIS, it's knowing, okay, what does success look like for the student? So success for a student in this intervention would be able to exhibit mindfulness as a helping coping skill, able to obtain a positive outlook on life, ability to identify strong emotions. And these were Likert scale questions. So scaled questions in that student survey. So it wasn't just open-ended and all qualitative. We were trying to truly implement a quantitative piece. So that's what we looked at as well. And then I know Susan added some extra data points that we haven't thought of yet, but it's something that we may want to introduce and implement in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Haley. So I just offered a way to take it a step further in thinking about how we design the daily progress report and utilize something that we're already comfortable with if we've employed check and check out, and how we pull in some of those skills so it prompts the teachers across the system in the context that the students are going back in to remind those students to use those skills, or for the teacher to perhaps model. And we want to be careful with the daily progress report because sometimes the students might not need to use those skills on certain days. So it might be a little tricky to progress monitor using a DPR. So, because again, students might not need to use those skills. And so it's going to be hard to track. But there could be a really quick check-in with the teacher. And again, we really want the teacher to be prompted and reminded that these are the skills that the student is working on. Additionally, we wanted to talk more explicitly beyond that Likert scale, right? Beyond the self-report into really tracking on-task and off-task behavior. And so we wanted to remind everybody that we have that B+ app that was launched. And so there's a link right in the slide deck to that application that's available to download on your phone. And then finally, perhaps looking at classwork completion as an indication that things are getting better. So kind of really moving away from self-report and looking at those behaviors that maybe, or those data points that really drew our attention to this child needing additional supports. Again, I want to elevate a couple points: the symmetry of process across teams, right? We're using the same kind of process to look at, only now we're looking at specific students who we're concerned about, but we're moving into organizing groups before we individualize. The capacity building that's going on with the co-facilitation is amazing. And notice it's layered and connected to Tier 1. So we're increasing dose frequency and small group interactions so that those students have an opportunity to be able to practice it a little bit more frequently. So again, with that, we're going to put you in breakout rooms, and same question: how is this different from your current way of work? I've offered some considerations for discussion, and as you're having these conversations, I've also offered places in our volume 2 where you can find more information and detail related to trying to put this in place as a TA provider in the schools and districts that you're working in. So Kelly, I don't know if you guys want to, I'll pause there and have you take a picture of it again to inform the conversations that you're having in your breakout rooms. Please also remember to identify a report out person. So we want to do a really quick report out at the end of our 10 minutes.
Okay, here we go. A little hot down there.
I love this song. I think it should be the ISF theme song.
Oh, all right.
You guys have to listen to the words. I'll send it.
I co-sign that.
But it's awesome. I love to play it. It gets everybody moving and I can't not dance when it's on. Okay. We are quickly running out of time. So we're going to do a really quick whip around. If we could get just 2 folks to do a report out, and then we might extend our time just a couple of minutes. I know that many of you will have to leave, but we will have it recorded because Haley still has some brilliant messages to provide us. So with that, do I have 2 volunteers to do a quick report out? Now
I can report out on my team. Our breakout room. So in our breakout room, there was really good dialogue about how, because it was about mindfulness throughout the tiers and using that phrase of giving an additional dose in tier 2, that was a change in what has happened in the past. It seemed like the tiers were more distinct and tier 2 had all of these things, but were not necessarily aligned to what tier 1 was doing. And what was mentioned is that knowing that the whole school-wide we're working on certain skills, and so mindfulness strategies, that there's almost a transference of skills in the classroom and more communication with staff members because they already know what the skills are. And so if students in tier 2 needed an additional support learning those skills, then teachers already know what they are. Mm-hmm. And then we also talked about the request for assistance form, and even calling it a referral versus a request for assistance form, and even the semantics are important. Yeah. So that's, and then we just finished our conversation about that request for assistance form. Did I get everything, Amy and Sheila? Okay.
That's awesome, Haley, and thanks. You made some really great points, and all of those considerations are in the chapter 5 of the ISF monograph volume 2. And thank you, Katie, for putting that link in. So just again, to remind you that we really do a great job of scripting the moves, and language is really important. We're trying to bring the technical expertise onto the team so that we can create that universal or that request for assistance protocol, and students can stay in the home school rather than use a referral process where we're literally handing the responsibility over to a different entity. And so words really matter, language really matters. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. So can I get one more person to do a quick report out?
Sure, Susan. My team had 3, I think, major takeaways. One was Miriam started by talking about how impressed she was that mindfulness was really represented in each of the tiers and defined, and people knew what it looked like and felt like at each of the tiers. And that took us into a conversation about how could we do that for all of the strategies that are going on in our schools. So I love Miriam's words when she said, what's the trunk of the tree? So when we think about core components, how do we do that with trauma-informed practices? How do we do that with SEL? How do we do that with restorative? Because we have so many schools that think these things are in place of, as opposed to really thinking and being intentional about how these work through the tiers. Mm-hmm. And then Katie also reminded us that we needed to think about, if we're doing this for the students in our buildings, how are we connecting these practices with the adults in our buildings? And then Bob just kept bringing us back to, and don't forget that we always have to be thinking about database decision-making along the way.
I love that. You know, it's really important as we have all these different initiatives we're trying to rally around, right? It's important to customize to fit the specific needs of the children and the staff that we're serving. And we need to be really selective as we're using those terms to be very specific about what the skills are. As a result of this, what are kids going to say and do differently? As a result of this, what are adults going to say and do differently to support the utilization and model those skills in the different contexts? Rather than thinking that this is a separate trauma-informed thing, this is a separate restorative practices. So really having time to have those conversations is essential. So I know, again, we're running out of time. So Haley, I just wanted you to do a quick review of the teaming, because this is a really nice highlight, and then maybe we'll save some of the successes and challenges moving forward another time. But if you could just talk really quickly about this slide.
Sure. So for the high school, as we know, the high school staff is pretty big. There's different departments, different entities, especially with our specific subgroups that we focus on. And so teaming at tier 2 really is filtering with that request for assistance form. We use the TIPS agenda. There's a formal process. And what is new this year to help make our operational procedures more efficient is we are using a color-coded feature. So our request for assistance form is a Google form. On the back end, for you Googlers out there, it's a Google sheet normally. And so our support staff is identified by a color. So when we look at the referrals as a team, if that student is a English language learner who already has a relationship with our EL specialist that is on the team, then that is the person to check in with the student. If it is a student that is really, really struggling with their mental health, I know they have 5 different teachers have already requested this student. We met with the student and uncovered that it is a need for MCBH, then MCBH would be highlighted, that clinician. So that clinician would work with that family and that student for services. And then it depends again who it is. So for example, if that student is up for an SST, because our SST is one of the bridges between tier 2 and tier 3, then the SST coordinator would be highlighted in that color. And so we are utilizing a color coded system to decide which member will be checking in with the student based on what the needs are that are communicated through the request for assistance form, and also other information about the student. And then the interventions are offered based on the problem behavior that is reported in that request for assistance.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Haley. So again, a big takeaway is how much focus you all place on the operational, the coordination of care, right? And putting in ways that keeps us thinking about the systems planning aspect of how many kids are in need and how do we quickly get them help specific to their needs. So I love the color coding idea for the teaming. And again, using the symmetry of process with the TIPS agenda form, I think is really brilliant because you're using that across tiers and it really helps promote that symmetry of process across teams. Okay, so I know we're running over time. I am going to skip. There are slides that were hidden in this presentation. So as you download those slides and look at other slides and you have questions for us, there's contact information from Haley and Casey and Esther, and we can't thank you enough for spending time and doing all the planning with us. And we completely geeked out on all the incredible information you bring and all the work that you've done. We're in awe of that. So we really appreciate you sharing with us. So before we close, I just wanted to make sure you all were aware that we have 2 items hot off the press: installing an interconnected systems framework at the district community level brief that offers some technical assistance guidance and case studies, and there's one for school level. So those are 2 items that are hot off the press that we're really excited. And thank you, Lucille, for guiding and leading those 2 briefs. And then we also wanted to offer that there are 2 new webinars that have been posted. There is one on staff wellness. And so we've offered you the link on the PBIS YouTube channel. And then we have just posted through our MHTTC partner, thanks to Kelsey and her brilliant team for offering ISF on equity. And that is a link to that session. Right now, there's just a PDF, but pretty soon the recording will be posted for your viewing pleasure. And it's extraordinary. We have Kurt Hatch on there, and so highly recommend that. We also wanted to highlight that there is a new integrated tiered Fidelity inventory that brings in not only the mental health piece, but the equity piece. So I just wanted to make sure you all knew that was on there on the PBIS site. So we've offered the link for you directly. And then just a reminder, we do have those specific strands. And if you want to learn more from the fantastic team from Monterey, remember that we did interview Casey Rodenbush from Monterey in our E2 session from the forums. So just again, want to remind you to use those as ways to help your technical assistants and guide the work that you're doing. We have upcoming PLCs. Our next PLC is March 26th, so save your date, save the calendar, and you might want to add an additional 30 minutes on since we have gone over today. So appreciate you all hanging with us. It was absolutely a pleasure to be with you all, and I hope you have a fantastic, fantastic weekend.